And so I think even indirectly, you guys have a really great educational component to the show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we credit Kwame Alexander, who, now I know that there was Black poets.
Yeah.
But to interact with one, and to interact with one makes poetry more relevant. And I was like, man, if I had a Kwame Alexander as a study in school, I would been a lot more interested. If maybe a crossover came out when I was, maybe it'll be discussion on how to flip the word, or how to catch it. And to be honest, to your credit, I've had several crossover interviews. We've had junkets, but nobody pointed that out. So that's your gift.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're making me sort of. I was like, whoa! I know that, but I didn't catch that.
It's okay.
Yeah,
that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Hey, I like that. Yeah.
That's What's up, bro? It's your boy, Mike Muse. So another conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in my conversation with my next guest. I'm just going to come in hot with them. You all know who this man is. Doesn't need much of an introduction. The incredible actor, Derek Luke. What's happening, man?
Blessed, man. Especially with that intro.
We're coming in hot because we're talking a little bit off air about people we're standing for. And audience, I admittedly stand for Drake. Drake can do no wrong.
All right.
Just coming off the Dreamville Festival with J. Cole and Drake co-headline. And I ask you, who are your people?
Tobe, Kendrick, the classics, Nas, Jay. I like J. Cole.
Yeah.
I gotta be a little more specific in these days, But they on heavy rotation.
So I'm noticing you like artists with verses and good lyrical ability.
Yeah, it's like the rules of acting. Don't watch bad acting. Only watch good acting.
Bars.
I didn't mean to say it like
bar?
I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it that way.
Is that a bar?
Nah. It's a perspective.
So,
like good bars is a perspective.
I call it a hot 16.
Oh, word? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey.
I will say this though, J. Cole. I've always been a fan of J. Cole, but I think J. Cole is one of those people who we need in our industry because I love range, and for so limited amount of time, we didn't have enough MCs who had range of lifestyle perspectives and POVs, and I've always thought J. Cole's perspective was amazing. And coming off the Dreamville Festival, man, seeing him live on stage in his hometown just put a different battery in his back, and the way he was spitting, I'm like, yo, I think I have to put J. Cole up there with one of my top MCs right now of all time, up there with Kendrick, because Kendrick can also do no wrong.
Yeah, nah.
Did you see his concert on from Paris live on Amazon, or maybe you saw it in person? I don't know.
I think I was in New Orleans a few months ago, and he came through. So
did you get to see him in concert?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was there.
Yo, his stage performance as an actor, I'm wondering how do you relate to that?
It was music and sound in the right place. It was surrounded by art. That's how music should be presented. That's how art should be presented.
I totally agree. I've always thought Kendrick as a very theatrical performer.
Really?
I remember seeing him. I saw him live a couple of times, but I remember seeing a performance. I think it was at the Grammys. And the way it was so theatrical, the way he used fire. And it was almost like he had these ninjas on stage and they were climbing the walls of fire, right? And I had never seen that done by a hip hop artist before. And for me, as in that moment, I was like, oh, Kendrick is an artist in every sense of the word. And the way that he did that show, I only had the chance to watch it on Amazon Live, but it captured my attention for 2 hours, and it was the simplicity of the staging. His use of the lighting, and his use of his dancers was very strategic. And the way they were spatially positioned, and the movements weren't traditional 8 counts.
And I think those are the things that inspire me. It's kind of like, makes me think about Michael Jackson's. I call it like using all the 5 elements. You know what I mean? And I think as an actor, that's my desire going forward. Like I think I've used 1 or 2, but I've always had the desire to be as explicit and expressive
Yeah.
as I can.
How does an actor approach that dynamic, right? Because in order to do that, that takes a little bit of restraint, but also too being able to be outside the box and kind of letting go of your body and yourself.
Yeah, I think, like yourself, I think part of being an artist is visual, but is audible too. Audible meaning you keep your ears to the ground. And, art is never flatline. So I've been in projects, and I won't name some. I've been in projects where I felt like, okay, we got the drama, but this drama needs some rims. You know what I mean? Like it needs some 24s. And right now we're on stock. And the 24s is your pacing. The 24s is let's change the momentum of this drama. And I think I've been in that space for so long that just doing acting is not the total precipice of my heart. You know what I mean? So I just, when I see something, especially if it's a biopic, there's many ways to approach it. But I think art is in the moment.
Yeah. Speaking of biopics, for me, I'm very particular when it comes to biopics because I think a lot of times, and look, everybody has their own personal preference, right, in terms of, art's an eye of the beholder, so I want to just say that. But I think sometimes biopics approach it from like cradle to grave, and I don't like that. I like when a biopic has a very specific point of view, a very specific timeline, time frame, and then the creatives can really expound upon that person's totality of their life and really capture their constitution based upon a specific time, right?
So can I ask you, what's the last biopic that fits into that frame?
Ooh, the tables have turned. So the first one I'm going to go with, I'm ready for it though. The first one I'm going to go with is NWA. I love their use in specific. It was about their tour and the setup for the tour, right? And what was coming. So, and it was difficult because you had, NWA as a group, but then you had also too the individuals MCs of NWA. And so when you have all those storylines, it could have went left immediately, but they were able to use such great constraints, right, and not going too far over the cliff when it came to that, while also too keeping it very specific on that tour. I know this is also not a biopic, but MJ the musical on Broadway. I thought that it was the use of how Michael Jackson came out onto the stage for dress rehearsal, and we really never left that as he was preparing for the tour. But you were still able to get the constitution of who Michael Jackson was just in the rehearsals, just in the build-up, the pressure that he had on him.
Okay, you passed the test, man.
Yeah, what about you? Let me flip it back. Reversing the mic over here. That's good.
I think, in my home, which is interesting, I got a 7-year-old, him and my wife has been watching Elvis.
Oh.
And it's controversial on many sides, and I'm not trying to get in that controversy.
There's a plot twist right here.
But what I love is the director's attention to the sound of where culture is. Culturally, like this is the first time I ever saw on screen Elvis credited with the culture that influenced him. And when you focused on the culture that influenced, there was a certain pacing. There was, when you see him in the looking at the black minister, you can't go to there is hardly any subtle black churches. When you go and look, the nightclub, the jazz, and where all that was happening, it was a tone. So my man was like very detailed in showing that Elvis honed his inspiration out of that, but I also love the actor's approach.
That's really good because you really got to the lyrical aspect of it, and I love when a play or a film can be lyrical, right? I also too love when an art piece can be lyrical. I think there's something about the artist Kerry James Marshall's pieces that are very lyrical, right? And sometimes it is a literal moment where he puts the bars around the borders of his paintings, right? Just as much as I love Archibald Motley because he puts like black people in beautiful positioning of revelry and excitement and celebration. And so lyricality for me really means a lot, which is why I really got into the crossover, which is actually why why you're here, actually to promote and not to learn the bios that we both love. But I thought there was certain about the pacing of it. Like I didn't know what to expect when I started watching it, but the first thing that jumped out at me is how lyrical it was, right? And the use of the English language and words. So I can see why you possibly gravitated towards this project.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the family element. It was that I was normally, I just growing up, I was always a mentee chasing a mentor. And this gave me a chance to be the mentor affecting the mentee. I think, my wife, when we first met, she's the one that had the movie first. But she had this addictive habit of wanting to go to schools and churches and speaks to young people. And in my head, I'm like thinking like, yo, I ain't got nothing to say to young people. I'm like, what do you like? That word bothers me. And then give back, that word bothered me because there was no mental trigger because I still felt like I was looking for something. I was looking for my purpose. And so, yeah, I don't even know where my train of thought went.
It's fine. We're just talking.
Anyway.
No,
you're
fine.
But the crossover.
You landed it well. I love the fact that you even landed with purpose because what I appreciate is in this show, you guys are really unpacking, I think, the pressures and expectations of this new generation of children who are in K through 12, right? The expectation to be great. And then there's a scene in there, and I'm not going to give anything away, audience, but there's a scene in there that really talks about finding your purpose. And I've always been opposed to that. And I believe that we've damaged our children by having them find their purpose versus exploring their curiosity. And so for me, I'm all about follow your curiosity because then that could lead to your purpose, right? But when you feel like you have to be a fireman at the age of 3 and that's my purpose, is this a curiosity, right? Because if you don't become a fireman, have you failed, right? I love how one brother, this show has about 2 brothers, audience, with the passion for basketball, but how one brother knew what his passion was, but the other brother was still trying to figure it out. Like he mentioned photography, he mentioned clothes. I was like, that's what more young people need to see, right? Is exploring what your curiosity is.
Yeah.
Where do you land on that?
Where I land on it is I was just asked to speak at a school in the Bronx, in the X.
Yeah, the X.
I was at Lehman College and I was asked to speak on social justice and equity. I'm like going, man, I'm not even a collegiate dude. I'm like, you got the wrong dude. But what came out is this word called gift. And it was about how to mine your gift. That mining your gift is true equity because gifts makes room at the table. Because social justice is about, I want to be heard, but it's about, in Hollywood, I found myself at tables with people that don't look like me, sound like me. And for me, for the next generation is learning how to navigate so I can tell my son, now when you get to the table, this is what you do. You don't have to necessarily have a degree, but you have a degree in purpose and your gift will navigate you.
I love that. I always say your gifts will make room for you.
Yeah.
And I've always said my career is because I never applied for anything, Derek. Like I didn't pitch myself for SiriusXM with ABC, with GMA3. I've been very blessed and fortunate because I really believe the work has went before me. And I always say the gifts make room for you when it comes to that. It's really interesting that you really leaned into social justice because, and even hearing you start out by saying that you got the wrong person, I never felt like I could call myself an activist because I didn't look like the typical activist, right? Like I wasn't on the front lines. I wasn't marching. I didn't have the bullhorn. But someone said, no, Mike, the work you're doing through conversation and through economic activism in terms of the way that I was giving is an activist and helped me redefine what an activist could be and mean. So an actor could be an activist, a chef, could be an activist if you just open up your restaurant and maybe allow people to come in for a day and eat for free. Who's to say that's not an activist?
Yeah.
And so the way that we've pigeonholed different language and words when we started out, I think has made so many people feel less like they can't participate.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. When you said that, it made me think about serving. That activism is really like I always hear my wife telling my son about samurai, and at first I was like, babe, why are you talking to him about being a samurai? She says, because if you unpack the word samurai in I think Greek, whatever, it means to serve. It doesn't actually mean warrior. It means to serve somewhere, find somewhere and serve your gift to someone. And so, and I think, as we started, like, I think originally you probably asked me about the crossover. So I think
it's all tied.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Like our audience, this conversation is all tied, and so I don't do direct questions.
I like that.
And so I enjoy having a conversation.
Okay.
I have no questions written down. Nothing. We're just free flowing.
Okay.
Right.
I like
but
that.
everything we're talking about are all elements of the crossover. Right. We're talking about constitution. We're talking about serving.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking about purpose versus passion versus curiosity. Right. And I really want to get into transformational forms of education because the way this show is approaching education, I think is brilliant, even indirectly, in terms of how you guys use words like on the screen.
Yeah.
Like I love the abysmal, right? And you guys put whether it's a noun, adjective, verb, and then like you guys describe it. And I think this is an intergenerational show, right? But for kids who are watching it, I think it's a good way for them to learn and connect.
I like that.
Right? Because I've noticed that one of my friends' family, what they do with their children, they put the closed caption on. So they can read while they're watching to connect words.
Wow.
And I thought that was very powerful. And the daughter is brilliant in conversation. I don't know if it's a result of that, but I think there's something about the reinforcement of seeing a word and then hearing it, right? And then seeing in context and use.
Yeah.
And so I think even indirectly, you guys have a really great educational component to this show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we credit Kwame Alexander, who, now I know that there was Black poets, but to interact with one and to interact with one makes poetry more relevant. And I was like, man, if I had a Kwame Alexander as a study in school, I would been a lot more interested. If maybe a crossover came out when I was, maybe it'll be discussion on how to flip the word, or how to catch it. And to be honest, to your credit, I've had several crossover interviews. We've had junkets, but nobody pointed that out. So that's your gift.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're making me sort of. I was like, whoa! I know that, but I didn't catch that.
It's okay.
Yeah,
that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Hey, I like that. Yeah.
That's a favorite. But I say the same thing. So I'm an engineer by degree. Okay. And so I'm an industrial engineer. I did nuclear chemical research. But right out of college, I decided to pursue other interests because I didn't like it. And I always had this give back or service component about me, and to always go back and talk to like colleges in particular. I think sometimes that is my sweet spot because I wish I would have had somebody like me in college who is doing a career based upon lifestyle, intersecting sports, music, film, fashion, and technology, and pulling back the social constructs. But throughout all that, I'm still applying engineering principles of critical analysis, critical thinking, problem solving, and being solution oriented. Is exactly what we're taught in our engineering curriculum.
Wow.
But at the time I was coming up, the only destination jobs were Motorola and Microsoft. Google wasn't even a thing yet, right? And so I'm like, I can't see myself working in these companies because my personality doesn't fit that. But imagine if I would have went back to myself. I probably would have done better, got better grades, enjoyed my classes more, knowing I could have had a career in media, right? And applying it that way, right? And so the same thing with you in terms of Kwame about looking at it differently.
Yeah.
So is that why you and your wife created the nonprofit and the work that you guys do with looking at verses like rap and English and getting kids to be involved?
Yeah. So somebody gave me a script called Cram about 10 years ago. I looked at it and I was just like, I always love the situation of teacher, mentor, and mentee. However, I felt like it needed a more of a current voice. And lo and behold, we found Professor Christopher Emdin, who's a New York bestseller, who wrote For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood and the Rest of Y'all Too. After meeting him, we became ambassadors. After ambassadors, we became brothers. But what connected to me is probably what connected when I first went to a premiere. I had these, dope suit on, whether Hugo, Prada, Dolce, but I would always grab my sneakers. And it was a way to be solid, because I was like, everything else is new, but you can't touch my sneakers, because that's I'm familiar with that. And so Cram basically approaches it and says, let's change the way teachers teach and the way kids learn. And a way to teach a kid is to honor their culture. If you don't do that, that's like when I used to go down, I'm gonna say certain streets, and there would be high design fashion, and the security would come to the window, and the look on his face, he could have been black, white, or Latino, but it was like he was trained to respond to me as an offense. So if that's the same response, and I think it's over 60, 70% of teachers who teach in the hood are non-teachers of color. And I think what I love about Chris, he didn't come out angry. He says, hey, you guys need to visit the black church. You need to visit the barbershop. You need to visit where these kids are coming from. And there was one teacher that was really looking at these kids because they would come and got the Jordans on. And she's like, I don't understand that they put more emphasis on clothes. And he asked her, he was like, well, you have a car? He says, do you own it? She was like, no, I'm leasing. He was like, oh, you leasing it? Yeah. So you don't even own. So you're part of the American system. So he was drawing a conclusion. He says, now, what these kids are wearing is actually a shield from where they come from. And these clothes represent, like, this is how I really feel about myself, even though where I physically live is not where I really want to be. And so, man, he flipped it, and I was like, yo, we brothers forever. You know what I mean? I was like, I got to be a part of that story. And that's why I love people like him and Kwame. Yeah, I just feel like they're revolutionizing the landscape.
There's something about revolutionary education that is so important to everything you just mentioned about culture and identity and make you feel comfortable. I always talk about sometimes the importance, which I love the work that you and your wife are doing about reapproaching English and rap and looking at it from a different perspective, is because sometimes we have to teach differently. It isn't a one size fits all. In particular, with black boys are at highest risk if they are not reading proficient by the end of third grade, going into fourth grade. Statistically, they're more than likely on the path to the school to prison pipeline than any of their counterparts in terms of black girls, white boys, white girls, and Latinx community.
That's when I got left back, by the way.
Yeah, but see, that's the most important grade. And almost about the shield that you're mentioning is because what happens is, because they had the insecurities of not being able to read and reading comprehension, as you know, math gets more complicated with words and less about numbers. And so you can't really understand it. And so the insecurity comes out in forms of joking, laughter, clothing, right? To hide that I just don't know it. I don't know how to express it. I don't have the language or the words to say, I don't understand. Can you help? And so I love the work that you're doing regarding that. And Derek, I couldn't think of a better point. I mean, I could talk to you all day. But I think all that combined for me is really what the crossover is all about, right? Using this form of basketball to really engage people in a story about family and love and community and culture and education.
I mean, it's really, and I'm quoting Kwame, but crossover is just like a metaphor. He wanted to tell the story about family, and the crossover is, like in basketball, it's a tool. Like when life comes at you one way, you got to know how to shift to another. And so I love being in the position of a mentor. I give a shout out to my amazing cast because they're the true standouts in this project. And Amir and Jalen and even Sabrina, who play Dr. Bell. And so wherever y'all at, even if y'all don't hear this, just y'all really holding the crossover down. So thank you.
Now I had to shout out Joel Steingold, who's also part of the cast.
Yes.
A good friend of mine.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Derek Luke, thank you for everything, man. Thank you for your gift of talent and acting and your gift of service.
Oh, thank you.
You got to come back on the Mike and Muse show again. We can go a little bit further.
I would love it. Thank you.
No problem. Until next time, folks. Peace.